We sort of tend to think about immigration more as an employee benefit. I don't know if I would ever advise to someone to be 29 and start a law firm.
Professional services firms, they're not an easy business to grow.
We are almost exclusively flat fee.
That is a challenge. When you're not going by billable hours, then you have to start thinking in a different way. Hiring your first employee, without a doubt, is one of the biggest decisions.
Last year, we had an NPS score of 92, which is like unheard of in professional services.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that works with professional services firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Matt Meltzer, co-founder of Meltzer Hellrung, a law firm that specializes in corporate immigration. Matt's vision was to combine exceptional strategic and programmatic legal guidance with best-in-class technology to provide a service that makes immigration management easier for companies and more transparent, intuitive, and reassuring for foreign national employees. Matt also takes pride in and strives to build a workplace that treats employees with dignity and also invests in their long-term success. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
No, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. I think it's really interesting to hear different viewpoints, especially from an organization such as yourself, a law firm that is more tech-enabled than maybe many other law firms out there. And I'm sure we'll dive into that during the podcast. But I guess for our viewers and listeners out there that are maybe don't know who Matt Meltzer is, could you tell us a bit more about your journey into co-founding Meltzer Hellrung and what led you to specialize in immigration law?
For me, I don't really have a particularly sexy story about how I got into immigration. I graduated from law school in 2011 and moved to Chicago to be with the person who was then my girlfriend and is now my wife. And it was not a great time to graduate law school. It was not a peak economy. The first job I got was at another immigration practice, and I gladly took the job because it paid money and it made me employed. It was a really good place to learn. They threw way too much responsibility at young people without much supervision. So I learned a lot, made mistakes that I would never make again now. And I also met my business partner there. So my business partner, Matt Hellrung, had started at the same firm 6 weeks ahead of me. At the time, the organization was a little bit like a legal sweatshop. We were working a lot of hours, not getting paid a lot of money, and didn't seem like there was a much upside in staying. And so we were looking at where to go next, and looking at other firms felt sort of a little bit like jumping from the pot to the kettle. So it didn't seem that appetizing overall. And I was particularly interested in stretching myself to do things beyond just the plain legal work. Nothing against the legal work itself, but I was excited by the opportunity to continue to be learning in ways beyond just the legal imagination and the legal technical skills. And running my own business felt like that opportunity to stretch myself and continue to learn. And I was pretty young at the time, and I don't know if I would ever advise to someone to be 29 and start a law firm. Some part naivete, some part stupidity, some part bravery. I don't regret the choice. It's been a great journey, but it felt like at the time there was little downside risk to, felt like I could probably get a job elsewhere if this failed. The upside was great if things worked out well. Over time, there are probably years I could make more money, honestly, working for someone else. But the excitement of building something and working on a practice that reflects my vision and my values, and feeling like the upside of the long-term value is much higher working for myself has been really gratifying. It's, I think I thrive not necessarily having a boss, but being able to sort of set the ground rules of what I want to do. I don't every day get to choose what I want to do. There's still client demands and business demands, but it's different than just someone else handing me a pile of work and saying, here's what you have to do.
I think what you just said there, and I think it's so common amongst entrepreneurs, is like not having a boss and not being necessarily wanting a boss and being able to control your own life, your own decisions, and also the direction you go. And you also mentioned that you could have probably earned a lot more money going down a different direction than what you did at the moment, but the control you're able to have, the freedom, the building it with a vision and building something worthwhile rather than being paid on someone else's dime, I guess. I love hearing that from entrepreneurs, and I feel like it's a commonality amongst all entrepreneurs that everyone gets into it feeling similar things, right? I guess For listeners who may not be familiar, could you explain what an immigration attorney does and the specific services your firm provides?
Yeah, within the US, immigration attorneys do a lot of different things. Within the realm of business immigration, it's primarily working with companies who are sponsoring employees for visas. There are a variety of different categories that employees in the US can get sponsored for visas. They range from nationality-based visas to specific occupational work to, intra-company transfers. There are certain things that are probably fairly common in terms of structure, country to country, and if you're especially from an English-speaking country, in all honesty, a lot of the structures of immigration look fairly similar country to country. They have different names and titles, but the sort of paradigm looks somewhat similar in the UK to Canada to the US to Australia to Ireland. Clearly the fine details change, but the overall sort of structure looks honestly somewhat similar. And most of these work authorization visas require an employer to sponsor a visa. So it's a matter of navigating the process of getting an individual visa approved, but that's sort of like nuts and bolts for us. It's not that it's not important, but it's sort of not what we consider what sets us apart. Most attorneys have competency to get individual visas approved. Where we really try to strive for success is about the service as a whole. Thinking about how do we help clients strategically build immigration programs, companies that are larger and have 20, 30, 100, 200 plus foreign national employees. Questions of program management, how do you create something that's efficient so that you're not creating a whole new rule book every time that you're sponsoring someone? How do you make it efficient for the company in terms of their own administrative burden? How do you determine which kinds of positions should even get sponsorship? Where is it worth entering the market for foreign talent? Where is it not? What's sort of like the return on investment, and how do you keep things cost effective between different visa choices? Compliance is a big part for especially larger companies. And then really for us, we feel like the really important part is, as a service, this is the most high stress thing that any employee who has a visa or a foreign, some sort of work authorization benefit goes through. And so we sort of tend to think about immigration more as an employee benefit, even though it's a structural thing that is necessary for work authorization, but it's not that different in our opinion than getting health insurance or vision insurance or other kind 401k or other benefits. And so for us, this is really the most important benefit you're going to offer. It's the most sensitive, it's the most personal, it's the most vulnerable, it's the most scary, and we're not going to make immigration stress-free. We just can't do that. That's impossible, especially in the Trump administration. But we're going to try to lower the temperature as much as possible. We're going to try to make it that your employees feel cared for. Similarly, that the company feels like they are in strong and capable hands and have a partner here, so that they feel that this is something that it makes sense to pursue when they have the right employees that's worth pursuing. And that from an employee perspective, they feel like they have a real partner from their company, because we're often the first touch. Like, we often are handling visa issues well before someone's first day on the office. So before they have a relationship with their manager, before they have a relationship with colleagues, their relationship with their employer is through us. And we know that we're making a really strong first impression, for better or for worse. And so we say to the company that in terms of your longevity with the employee, in terms of turnover, in terms of maintaining that workforce that you've invested in, providing that this kind of service is essential to your long-term success. And so our goal is to really make immigration about attracting talent and wherever you need to locate it from and bring it to, and then keeping that talent so that at least immigration is not a structural barrier to keeping people, and it's not the reason people are leaving.
I guess it's a really interesting point there, because it's a very tough situation for anyone leaving or arriving anywhere, and then if the immigration legislation isn't done correctly, then your permanent status in that country can be taken away, right? And that's a very difficult situation for a lot of people to be dealt with. And so obviously that makes a lot of sense, and actually having someone there who knows what I's to dot, what T's to cross, and then also everything that comes with that, right? In terms of building a professional services firm, I think you're approaching now your 11th anniversary since starting the organization in 2014. What have been some of the most significant milestones and transformations during the last decade plus journey in growing? And let's be honest, professional services firms, they're not an easy business to grow. It takes time, it takes a lot of dedicated time and investment and building a network and things like that. So what are the most significant milestones and transformations you've had over those periods?
Yeah, the first milestone is hiring your first person, first employee, right? That's without a doubt the biggest one as a milestone after starting the company. And so in this century, as a professional services firm, you don't need a big office with a bunch of law books. I was able to start the firm with my business partner. We each were working from our respective dining rooms at home. I had a tiny printer scanner that, attached to my laptop, and that was my office. And, getting to the point where we had enough business to hire someone was without a doubt the first major transition, because it's a really big leap of faith, both the company and the employee. I think you cannot emphasize enough how, trying to convince someone that you're going to be able to pay them every 2 weeks is a leap of faith from that employee too, because there's no veracity to it. You don't have other employees. At this point in time, when we hire people don't walk in the door saying, am I going to be paid? Am I going to get a bonus? Are my benefits going to come through? That's just an assumption. But the first employee, that it's a reasonable sort of due diligence of is there enough there that you're going to be able to sustain my employment? The next big transition for us was we had a long-term relationship with a partner organization where they had a technology platform, and we were working with them as sort of the legal business partner, and we were helping them scale the technology. We have a lot of expertise in technology from my business partner first firm, and we've consulted with other technology organizations, and we were working with them pretty closely. And we got fees for each petition that we were working with them on, and the fees just were not enough. We were in a place where we had to get to overwork someone to hire another attorney, and then sort of basically be unprofitable with the new attorney for a little while, until we reached profitability, and then a very small margin of profitability until that person came to work, and we hit the cycle all over again. We said this is not sustainable for us to work together. We need to change the fees, and we tried to negotiate a new contract for about 1.5 years, and that didn't work out. And we ended up splitting apart, and that was how we actually started keeping a fair number of our clients, was through this partnership that sort of unraveled. And so it's not something I could tell anyone that, hey, here's a playbook for how to get clients. We would never have gone into it that way. But some of our larger clients that early on that we were able to get were through this partnership. And that unraveling, I think in the whole, the unraveling was probably for the best in the long run. But in the short run, it was incredibly scary. It felt really risky for us, the uncertainty of it. But that was a sort of like one of those major risks that we decided to take. It felt like we had reached a point of no return, and that we couldn't continue the way we were. And then the last big transition point, there's two big transition points I will just add to. One is deciding to build our own technology. And as much diligence as you did, you still, hindsight being 2020, I would do things I would do differently. But deciding to be a technology company in addition to being a services company is a major transition. It's a big difference between just offering a service and using third-party technologies versus owning your own technology, and what goes into that in terms of like the overhead, the cost, the oversight, the time, the people you need. And then the fourth one is last year we adopted a management tool called EOS, which is Entrepreneur Operating System, to help us continue to scale and grow and have better managerial practices. Because one thing no one teaches you at a law firm or in law school is how to manage a business. And I think at the point where we were struggling with management, and so adopting EOS, which is a toolbox where everyone can agree what the rules of the road are for how to run the firm, and a sort of structure, has been really key for our continued development. And it feels like we're on the right track with that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You mentioned some really big milestones, and I think there's some great ones. Hiring your first employee, without a doubt, is one of the biggest decisions, it feels like, outside of leaving your 9 to 5 and starting the business, is one of the biggest decisions, because it's a risk, another risk that you're taking on board. But I want to move on to what you mentioned there on the technology side. And one of the key differentiators, I think, about Meltzer and Hellrung is the fact that you have technology in-house. You've built your own technology. Can you share a little bit more detail about the technology and how you use it, how you view the role of technology in delivering a professional service?
Yeah. So technology at this point in the immigration industry is honestly fairly common. And there have been vendors who have been selling third-party technologies for probably close to 20 years at this point. And the technology at the core of what most of them do, the idea is that there was a centralized place where all three parties get together. And the parties are my firm, the employer, and the employee. Where can you upload information? Where can you add documents? And then we as a firm prepare everything, turn that information and document into an actual application that gets sent to the government. And where are we tracking information about expiration dates and keeping track of all the important things that happen thereafter? For us, Matt and I, my business partner and I, as I said, we worked at a technology-oriented firm as our first job. And so we sort of were inculcated with a notion of that technology is really important. All the technology providers that sell technology, I think, fall down is that they have so many different bells and whistles because they're selling mostly to law firms who each want to do things their own way, that there's not really a narrative of how the software is supposed to work. They make it such that everyone can make a tool out of all of the pieces they have, but it's also hard to create a comprehensive theory of what the application is supposed to do. And so we really felt that in order to deliver a really good service, the technology is inherently part of service. In the third decade of the 21st century, service and technology are one thing. You don't go to your bank and say, do you have an app? You don't go to your insurance company and say, can I file a claim online? That's inherent. And what makes some of those experiences better than others is the technology experience. Different banks might have different quality bankers and different rates and kind of stuff. But people will often choose how easy is it for me to move my money around? How easy is it for me to find an ATM? How easy is it to pay my bills? And I think the same thing is true of us. And it's sort of what the technology is fundamentally part of the service. And our goal is to make the technology able to answer the most basic things for our clients so that you don't need to talk to a human to get information. The things that don't require advice but are just facts. Where is my case? What's the tracking number on the package? What is the receipt number on the application? When might I expect this to be approved or reviewed? That's information that you can just go online and get. You don't need an attorney or a paralegal to tell you that. And you don't need to wait any time for that answer if you could just log in. And then when you are talking to an attorney or a paralegal, you're getting guidance. The resources who are here who are really talented humans to give you something more than just basic information. They're here to give you guidance and strategy, and they're here to give you context and not just the basic facts. So that's really key. And then for us, the technology is about creating the narrative and the experience. We wanted to, unlike those other third-party providers, have a really strong sense of what it means to go through a process with us. And so we've created, the UI, UX, the user experience is really key to how we view the technology in terms of how easy is it to participate in this process. That stress level, is this intuitive? Do I understand what's happening without, again, talking to a person? Because people who are working with us are busy professionals. They're logging in at 10 p.m. like any other one else and doing things late at night. And there's not someone to call at that time. It has to be intuitive.
I think it's really interesting, some of the points you mentioned there, especially in understanding that technology is now synonymous to every profession, whether it's banking or any other element. And a lot of professional services firms often are using third-party softwares to sell on or integrate into their own organization with client work. In terms of then, what does it typically look like if you were to go out and invest in building your own technology? Because I can imagine that is a stressful experience and tough in itself, developers, things like that. Yeah.
And I think there's always a question of what the scale of your technology is. And, going into that is a really hard question. And we knocked on we asked a lot of people for advice going into it. And we work in an industry where a lot of the people we work with are in technology. A lot of the people who get visas are technologists, software developers. A lot of my clients are entrepreneurs who are really talented in the development of technology. So I asked for a lot of advice. And so the question was, do we bring this in-house? Do we use a third-party developer? We ended up using early on a third-party developer, and we did sort of like a blueprint of sort of what we want to do. And we shopped around that blueprint to different software development houses and tried to get a sense of what different organizations would do and cost. and ended up choosing one development house to go with. And later on, we brought in sort of like the product ownership in-house and still have outside developers. But I think it's really a question of sort of like the scope of the software. Ours is almost like the operating system for the organization. But there's definitely lots of things that other law firms or professional services organizations do that are not operating systems. They might just be features or apps that plug into various things. And I think that's a really good question. And I think also a huge question that anyone should ask is, anytime they're developing things, is what is the ecosystem it's playing in? Like, what are they connecting to? If you're in, finance, does your system connect to QuickBooks or Xero or whatever it might be? If you're working in law, does it connect to a government? Does it connect to a system that your clients are using internally? Sort of like, what is the ecosystem? And then what does it also have to do beyond your own organization?
Makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of people out there that are always considering, okay, well, I know technology is the way I need to build it, bringing technology, but I guess it is, as you said, understanding what the ecosystem is that you would be able to do and where does it fit in your ecosystem as well as client's ecosystem. So I think it's really interesting. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the model of billing by the hour. Law firms in general, professional services firms typically are very much time-centric, time management, bill by the hour kind of sector, I guess, whether it's management consulting firms, accounting firms, law firms, whatever it might be. What's your opinion on billing by the hour? How are you currently pricing your services? What's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, we are almost exclusively flat fee. 99% of our billing is flat fee. And I think that professional services as a whole needs to be much more of an adopter of alternative billing models, whether it's flat fees or success fees, whatever it might be. I will say that immigration as an industry has largely moved to flat fee billing. We're not unique in this. I would say this is more of an industry standard. I think the last time I saw reporting on it, something like 80% of law firms at this point are doing flat fee for immigration. So we are not reinventing the wheel that way, but I do think it is beneficial. We as an organization are typically servicing the HR suite, not the GC suite at a company. And so having predictable pricing is really important because they're really key on budgets. They don't have the ability to say, oh, bill us by the hour and whatever it is. They want to know a price. And honestly, they don't have to care how profitable it is for us. Like, they don't care whether we would have made, charge them less for hourly billing if that was the case. They really are keyed in on predictability. And I think that, and for our side, it incentivizes us to be efficient. My wife is also a lawyer. She's a litigator, and she now works for an organization that is also on alternative billing models. But, she worked for a very large law firm for several years, and every day she would come home and tell me something, and I'd say, you're just stealing money from your clients. I don't feel badly for them because you're working for Fortune 100 companies and they're sophisticated, and if they don't realize that they're being stolen from, that's their problem. Like, these aren't vulnerable people. You have no organization whatsoever. Like, there's no systems, there's no processes. Like, you're reinventing the wheel every time you do things, and your law firm's been around for over 100 years. How is this possible? And the answer was, that's a feature, not a bug, because the inefficiency is profitable. To create process means that you will bill fewer hours. So I think, honestly, the flat fee is good for lawyers because it creates predictability on your pricing. It makes it easier to project what your revenue will be. I think it's good for clients to be transparent on pricing and give them predictability and budgeting. But I also think it creates, honestly, as a better experience because when you're on a flat fee, you're going to make the same amount of money no matter what you do. And so if we can get the work done in 10% less time, that's profit. But in all honesty, if we get the work done in 10% less time, our client isn't looking at us and saying, you should drop your prices. They're just really happy that their service got delivered to them fast.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, and you hit so many nails on the head there. In my opinion, on fixed fee value pricing versus billable hours, billing by the hour, for me especially, you nailed it there. It incentivizes inefficiency. It incentivizes people to take longer at what they're doing, even if it's something that can be done within the hour, within 2 hours. And you punish people or employees who are actually efficient? Because what you say is if they finish the task, oh, well, you have lots more time to be able to just pile on lots more. And you find that employees become overworked, disenfranchised, and then they end up leaving these large organizations, starting their own firms and going, nope, I'm going to go steer clear of what you've just done that, and I'm going to go in a different direction. And you're seeing that so much more in different markets, whether it's a small accounting firm, small consulting firms, or law firms such as yourself. So I think it's really interesting to hear that. This segment of the podcast I like to call the Entrepreneur's Room. And it's a series of questions that we like to ask our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate in their business. So the first question I like to ask at this stage of the podcast is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
It's a great question. And I think that's a question I probably spend the most time asking myself that question and looking critically at my calendar and my scope of my responsibilities and saying, what should I be spending my time on? Not just what am I spending my time on, and how do I change that, and what do I need to do structurally inside the organization to change that scope of responsibilities. I wear way too many hats today. I think we're in, as an organization of our size, where we're about 30 people, we are in a place where we're trying to scale up. So we want to be competing with bigger players. We want to be providing more services. We want to be more sophisticated. So we are stretching the resources of what we do have and doing things where that larger organizations do with less people. So it means that many people are wearing way too many hats, with the goal of getting larger so that people can wear fewer hats. More people, each wearing fewer hats. But my responsibilities within the firm are, within this EOS model, I wear the visionary hat, which is the person who's supposed to think about like the big picture of the firm. I oversee what we call external operations, which basically means everything that goes into actually providing services. So that is our attorney, paralegal, legal assistant teams, and our software product. So I am overseeing the attorneys, I'm overseeing the paralegals, and together they should play well, and we are a law firm, but I view sort of the paralegals as the heart and soul of the firm, because in immigration, we're not uncommon where we have 2 times the number of paralegals to attorneys. So we're not an attorney firm, we are really a legal services firm where paralegals are primary. Still am involved in legal work and client work, managing relationships, and a big part is also sales. I'm trying to bring new clients in. The revenue generation really lives with myself and my business partner to bring new clients in the door. So in all honesty, too many things, and want to continue to scale and delegate more so that that list is short.
I think it's really interesting for me because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners doing this podcast and outside in my network, and I ask this question a lot, and it's always very interesting when you hear the responses, right? You hear the life cycle of where an entrepreneur is in their business and when they're scaling and how many hats they're wearing versus when someone's maybe in the twilight years, maybe looking to step away, they want to do just more strategy things and things like that. So it's really interesting to hear that, and I love asking that question. In terms of then your metrics and the most important metrics to you, every business needs to be run, and you touched on it, alluded on it earlier. They don't teach you in law school how to run a business, right? So what are the most important metrics for you when running the business?
Yeah, great. It's a really good question. And so we have a scorecard, and in the EOS model, there's a leadership team meeting. There are meetings for each of these sort of subsidiary organizations, and each team has a scorecard, and some of those data points get shared across teams. Some of them are specific to teams. On the leadership side, we're really key, of course, on revenue, expenses, what is projected, what's coming out, what are new billing. And then we've worked really hard to try to understand capacity on our team, because we don't bill by the hour. So the question is, how are we measuring workload? How are we measuring whether we have the right number of people? What's sort of like our capacity as a individual to individual, as a team? And so we've created a point system, which is flawed, but is basically in lieu of an hourly system, saying like the work you're being assigned, sort of what is the sort of like, how much what's the value of that in terms of something similar to time? And what does it mean in terms of your overall workload? And we have averages of, we look at what sort of our capacity of, and what are people producing person by person, and as averages as the team. We are measuring really carefully email response time because our goal is an average of one business day for any email. And so we measure everyone's emails, and the goal for the firm is about 4.5 business hours as an average for a firm. And so we adhere pretty close to that. And if we're sliding, we're saying, what's happening? Is there some issue that's come up? Is this a people problem? Is there, there's some seasonality to the work, so there are peak seasons. We also look at NPS scores. We ask everyone for feedback on every single case we do. And so we don't get enough NPS scores. In all honesty, we want more. But we look at how are we doing? Last year, we had an NPS score of 92, which is like unheard of in professional services. And so we look at that and say,
you're doing something right.
Something's working. And so if that starts sliding, then that sort of says, okay, what's happening? What are the reasons that people are unhappy?
Sure. It makes a lot of sense as well. I love the fact that you mentioned actually looking at capacity and workload of your own employees, and because that is a challenge when you're not going by billable hours, then you have to start thinking in a different way. And how do you manage and operate a law firm full of a different model to what typically you might see? So it's really interesting to hear that. In terms of then, you mentioned there just now how you are responsible, you're the visionary side of things of the business, you are, and your business partner are responsible for generating revenue, right? And bringing in opportunities and bringing in the sales. How are you currently growing the business, and what kind of business development activities do you typically do? Run conferences, networking events? What are you currently doing?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. So much of our business comes in through a referral. So it's about continuing to ensure that we are front and center, top of mind to the people we already work with. So that is, we have a weekly newsletter. We had been monthly, but the pace of change under the Trump administration compelled us to make a weekly newsletter with what's happening, our guidance. We have a monthly webinar that goes out to a list that is larger than our client base. And we typically have somewhere right now like 250 people coming to a webinar. We are active on social media, so putting up content mostly on LinkedIn. That's our primary resource. We are constantly looking at where to be in terms of conferences and trying things out. We're trying to be in places where we're not necessarily conventional. We don't want to be one of multiple law firms at a conference. We don't want to be compared to others. So we're trying to say, where can we go where we are one of one? Some of those places work better than others, and so we're constantly trying on new things. We are trying to get our voice in more places, like a podcast. Yeah, so, and then, being active in various professional spaces. My business partner, he's active in EO. I've been active in advising entrepreneurs at the University of Illinois and the University of Chicago, and have been active at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. So being active in professional and civic organizations to, continue to meet new people and be thriving as part of the community.
So you're in a lot of places doing a lot of things, a little bit of everything from the sounds of things, which is always really important. In terms of then, you've now been running the organization for over a decade, had many milestones. I'm sure you've had many lessons along the way. What is the biggest lesson you could share with us today in terms of your journey?
The biggest lesson I would make is find a network and mentors and people to support you as early as possible. Your organization is to some degree an echo chamber. Like, you can get good data. You have the wherewithal to build a great scorecard early that will tell you a lot of things, but devising the strategies to solve your problems often requires you to think beyond the organization, to say, what don't I know? And the only way to, even if you are really great at constantly listening to podcasts, reading books, reading the Harvard Business Review or whatever it is, the lived experiences of others is really, really valuable. So finding people who can mentor, who can be in conversation. I always really like talking to other lawyers, but I also really like talking to other people in professional services, because the reality is that running a marketing agency or running a management consulting firm or running an accounting firm is not all that different than running a law firm. It's pretty much the same, and the problems are mostly the same, and it's great to think that way, but it's also, professional services can be a little bit stale and not particularly innovative, and so really great to talk to people who are in other industries that are more on the forefront of change, to hear about what kind of strategies they're doing to approach things. I honestly, I think that I would be very reluctant to rely on the wisdom of a lot of other law firm leaders because I view the law firm world as not particularly well managed to begin with and not necessarily innovative. I think it's sort of a question of what is your identity as a business leader? Are you looking to do something that feels comfortable for you? Are you trying to just make sure that this is a profitable organization and people stick around? Are you trying to be cutting edge? I think you have the question of like, what is your identity as an organization? How do you want to be perceived to your clients, and like, what do you want to be doing overall? And sort of like, what are your goals? And that will sort of also lend to questions about who do you talk to most often.
I think that people are the most powerful leverage to any business, whether you're hiring someone, whether you're getting mentoring, whether you're just getting advice or consulting, right? And just understanding that when you're not alone and you know that there's so much more information out there, and law firms particularly aren't known for, as you mentioned, then they're very much considered the old school kind of attitude. So I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. So that's great. In terms of, I like to end every single podcast with the same question, right? And it's if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
It's a really phenomenal question. If I could have a magic wand to solve one business problem, I don't think this is by no means unique to us. And this is a question that is really hard and so many organizations struggle with. Some are better at it than others. Identifying who can manage and how to teach people and inculcate management. Because at the end of the day, some of the biggest pain points are, going back to your question of what are you doing today, people having too much to do on their plate because they don't have people who they can trust to do things for them. And it's not the technical skills, it's the people management and the project management skills. Some of it is finding, in our business, people who are really technically proficient are not people who often really want to be managers. So pulling from a pool of people who really like sitting at a desk and writing are not always people who want to be managing. And then similarly, once you do identify people, how do you best train them to be in that position for success? And training, in my mind, does not start with sending someone to a conference or some sort of webinar. It's, what do you do from day one to give them models on what good management looks like?
Matt, that's a great place to end it. And thank you very much for sharing your time today and sharing your insights. It's been a really great conversation. For all the viewers and listeners out there that might want to reach out to you, where would they go? How would they find you?
You can find my website at meltzerhellrung.com. We have a contact us page. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my email at mmeltzer@meltzerhellrung. Any way you reach out, we will absolutely get back to you.
We'll put everything in the description of the podcast anyway, so that anyone can reach out. But Matthew, again, thank you very much for sharing your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a really exciting and fun conversation.
Fantastic. All right then.